I was sipping my morning coffee, enjoying the rare peace of my backyard when it happened. The knock. Not a polite knock, not a friendly hello neighbor. No, this knock was the kind that rattles your chest, the kind that makes your stomach do somersaults. I opened the door. There she was, Gloria, the HOA president, clipboard in hand, shoes clicking like she was announcing her arrival in slow motion. Her expression was deadly serious, like a drill sergeant who just discovered a recruit hid a smartphone in their sock. "I'm here about your shed," she said, voice sharp, teeth gritted. I blinked. "My shed." "Yes, your shed," she repeated like a judge reading a sentence. "It's violating 5 HOA regulations, and the fine is $80,000. $80,000, I laughed nervously, thinking she was joking, but she was. Her eyes didn't twinkle, her lips didn't twitch. There was no hint of a joke. My stomach sank like a brick dropped in a lake. I think there's been a mistake," I stammered. "No mistake," she said. "You have 24 hours to pay or we will take further action." I felt my coffee go cold in my hand. 24 hours. That's how long they gave me to come up with $80,000 for a shed I built legally, following every city regulation known to man. I could feel my heartbeat echoing in my ears. I wanted to slam the door, but something made me pause. I needed to stay calm, stay smart. You want me to pay $80,000 for a shed?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Yes," she said, arms crossed, clipboard tight against her chest like a shield. "The board has voted. This is non-negotiable." I tried to process the absurdity. I mean, this is a suburban HOA, not the mafia. But Gloria, she was definitely auditioning for mob boss. I imagined her wearing a pinstripe suit, counting envelopes of cash in the night while muttering, "Nobody disrespects me." I took a deep breath. Humor always helps me think. I forced a smirk. "Okay, then I guess I'll see you tomorrow, Gloria. I'm sure there's a payment plan." Her smirk didn't return. She gave me one of those looks that could freeze a grown man mid-thought. I felt a chill run down my spine. "And if you think you can ignore this," she said, leaning slightly forward, "the HOA has ways to collect. Liens, property seizure, legal fees, you name it." The words hit me like a punch. This wasn't just a fine anymore, it was a threat. My mind raced. Could they actually do this? Could an HOA demand 80 grand and expect to get it? I glanced around, my quiet neighborhood, my perfectly mowed lawn, the friendly neighbors who waved in the morning, all suddenly felt dangerous, like I'd walked into a movie set where I was the unwitting protagonist. Gloria stepped back, tapping her clipboard. "I suggest you make the right choice." And then, just like that, she was gone. Shoes clicking, door slamming, leaving me standing there with my coffee now lukewarm and a pit in my stomach the size of a boulder. I shut the door, leaned against it, and let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. My shed, my life, my peace, all apparently hanging on the whims of a woman with a clipboard and a taste for chaos. I walked back into the kitchen, staring out the window at my backyard. My shed sat there, innocent as ever, mocking me. It had no idea it had become the centerpiece of a battle I hadn't signed up for. And then I thought, if they think I'm paying $80,000, they've got another thing coming. I grabbed my phone, ready to call neighbors, friends, anyone who might know how to handle a rogue HOA president with a vendetta. My hand shook slightly, but my mind was racing, plotting, because something inside me snapped right there. I wasn't going to be bullied, I wasn't going to fold, and I certainly wasn't going to let Gloria win. Little did I know, that knock on my door wasn't just a warning. It was the beginning of a war, one that would make my quiet suburban life feel like a battlefield. And I knew deep down that by tomorrow nothing would ever be the same. I woke up the next morning hoping maybe, just maybe, it had all been a bad dream. Maybe Gloria and her clipboard had vanished into thin air, taking her $80,000 nightmare with her. Nope. The first sign came when I stepped outside. Letters taped to my truck, fluttering in the morning wind like tiny warnings from a cartoon villain. My coffee cup nearly slipped from my hand as I read the first one. Immediate payment required. Failure to comply will result in liens and legal action. I stared at it for a solid minute, half expecting it to vanish if I blinked hard enough. Then came the emails, 3 in a row, all marked urgent in bold red letters, each one more ominous than the last. They were full of legal jargon I barely understood, and every sentence ended with phrases like final notice, non-negotiable, and we are authorized to act without further warning. My phone rang. Gloria, she didn't say hello, she just said, "I suggest you don't test us, cash now, or the board will take matters into their own hands." I hung up, staring at my phone as if it might explode. Cash now or else. My backyard shed had somehow transformed into the center of a suburban hostage situation, and I was the unwilling main character. I knew I couldn't pay. $80,000 didn't just appear under my couch cushions. And even if it did, I wasn't about to give it to a woman who clearly thought she was running some kind of mafia operation under the guise of an HOA. I had to think. I decided to document everything. Every letter, every email, every phone call, every creepy look from Gloria when she walked past my lawn like she owned the world. My hands shook slightly as I snapped photos, recorded voicemails, and typed notes faster than a caffeine-fueled journalist. Then came the real escalation. Around noon, Gloria arrived again. But this time, she brought backup, two of the HOA board members who looked like they had been cast from a low-budget crime drama. One of them, tall and bald, had a permanent scowl tattooed on his face, while the other fidgeted nervously, constantly adjusting his poorly ironed polo shirt. Gloria smirked. "We just want to make this easy for you," she said, voice dripping with false sweetness. "You can settle this quietly, cash only, no checks, no bank transfers, no questions asked." I forced a laugh. "Cash only, what is this, a heist movie now?" Her smile didn't waver. "We have our ways," she said, leaning in slightly, just close enough to make me uncomfortable. "Remember, the HOA is not powerless." I stepped back. Every instinct in me screamed danger. Every rational thought screamed, don't let them see you sweat. But my gut told me one thing: this was no longer about rules or fines. This was extortion. I needed a plan, and fast. I started looking around my property with fresh eyes, noticing how vulnerable everything was. My shed suddenly looked like a tiny fortress under siege, my fences mere suggestions of security. I realized Gloria wasn't just threatening me, she was testing me, seeing how far she could push before I cracked. As if to prove her point, later that afternoon, I saw the two board members loitering near my driveway, pretending to check a meter or measure the grass. I swear one of them glanced at my living room window like he was looking for secret weapons. My blood ran cold. I wanted to scream, but instead I whispered to myself, "They're trespassing, they're breaking the law, and they're about to regret it." I grabbed my phone and started calling neighbors discreetly. Anyone who might know the HOA's history, any dirt they could spill, any witness to Gloria's madness. If they were going to escalate, I needed allies. By the time the sun started to set, I realized something chilling. This was far from over. Gloria wasn't just an overzealous HOA president, she was a predator in khakis, and I was in her crosshairs. I paced my backyard, heart hammering, imagining all the ways she could strike next. And then it hit me: if she was willing to threaten me publicly and bring her enforcers, what would she do if I fought back? I stared at my shed, calm and silent in the evening glow, and made a decision. I wasn't going to let fear control me. Whatever this was going to become, I'd be ready. And if Gloria thought she could bully me into submission, she was about to learn the hard way that some homeowners bite back. And just as I leaned back against the fence, trying to breathe, my phone buzzed again. Another message, no words, just a photo. It was my shed, taken from the street, and Gloria had circled it in bright red marker. I felt the first real surge of adrenaline. This was no longer a dispute about a shed, this was war. And I was about to pick up my first weapon. That night, sleep didn't come. Every little sound outside my house made me jump: the rustle of leaves, the distant bark of a dog, even the wind whispering through the trees. My mind replayed Gloria's threats over and over. $80,000, cash or else. I was restless, packing my living room, trying to convince myself I wasn't overreacting. But deep down, I knew I wasn't imagining things. This wasn't just paranoia, it was intuition honed by every bad HOA horror story I'd ever heard. Something was about to happen. Around midnight, I heard it, footsteps in my backyard, slow, careful, deliberate. My stomach sank. I crept to the window and peered through the blinds. Two shadows moved near my shed, measuring tape extended, squinting at the siding like they were planning a construction project. But this wasn't construction. This was trespassing, and it was personal. My heart started racing. I could hear it in my ears, loud enough that I was sure the neighbors would hear it too. I grabbed my phone to call the cops, but something stopped me. These people weren't ordinary intruders. They were HOA board members acting like vigilantes under Gloria's command. And if I called the cops, they could claim I was the aggressor. I needed to handle this carefully. Slowly, I moved to my porch. My hands brushed over the shotgun I kept for emergencies, not to scare anyone but for protection. Tonight felt like one of those emergencies. I stepped outside, letting the cold night air hit me. The footsteps froze, one of them whispered, "Did you hear that?" I cleared my throat. "Private property, leave immediately." My voice was calm but firm, carrying across the yard like a warning bell. They didn't move. I took another step, gripping the shotgun tightly. I racked it loudly, the click-click echoing in the darkness. It wasn't aimed at them yet. I didn't want anyone to get hurt, but the sound was enough. They froze, like deer caught in headlights. "This is your final warning. Get out or you'll regret it." Finally, after what felt like an eternity, they scrambled. One tripped over the garden hose. Another almost ran into the fence. I swear I could hear them muttering curses under their breath as they vanished into the shadows. I stood there, chest pounding, shotgun still in my hands, trying to process what had just happened. My shed, my quiet little sanctuary, had become the front line of a suburban war. I leaned against the porch railing and let out a shaky breath. The adrenaline was intense and my hands were still trembling, but there was a satisfaction too. Gloria had overstepped, and now she knew I wasn't someone to mess with. I went back inside, locked every door, and sat in the living room staring at my backyard. I couldn't shake the feeling that tonight was just the beginning. Gloria wouldn't let this go quietly. She was the type who escalated, the type who thrived on control. Then, just as I was starting to calm down, my phone buzzed again. A text, no words, just an emoji, a red circle around my shed. I froze, my blood ran cold. Gloria had somehow sent it, she was watching, she was daring me. I sank into the couch, trying to think rationally. Options ran through my mind. Call the cops and risk being painted as the aggressor, fight back directly and risk legal consequences, or wait and gather more evidence. My gut told me I needed a plan. I realized then that if Gloria thought intimidation and fear would work on me, she had another thing coming. She had crossed the line into illegal territory. Trespassing, harassment, threats, this was no longer just a HOA dispute. This was criminal behavior. But I also knew one thing, I couldn't let my fear show. That was exactly what she wanted. I needed to project confidence to show that her power stopped at my front door. I made a mental note. Tomorrow, I'd start documenting everything, gathering evidence, maybe even recording her next move. And if she tried anything like this again, I'd be ready. I looked out the window at my shed, bathed in moonlight, silent and still. It seemed innocent now, but I knew better. It was the center of the storm, and I was standing right in the middle. As I turned off the lights and tried to get some sleep, one thought kept repeating in my mind. They think they can scare me. They have no idea what I'm capable of. And for the first time, I felt a flicker of anticipation beneath the fear. This wasn't just about surviving, it was about fighting back. Little did I know, the next move in this suburban chess game would come faster and closer than I ever imagined. I barely slept that night. Every creak of the house, every gust of wind against the windows made me jump. My mind was still replaying the shadows outside my backyard, the sound of those board members scrambling away, and the text with the red circle around my shed. Gloria wasn't done, I could feel it. Then came the knock, not late at night, not in secret. No, this knock was loud, authoritative, and came with uniformed presence. My heart sank. I opened the door and there they were, two police officers standing with their hands at their sides, eyes serious. Behind them, a familiar figure, Gloria, sputtering and pointing, her clipboard clutched like a shield. "She threatened the HOA," she cried. "He pulled a gun on us in his yard. This is outrageous. You have to do something." My stomach twisted. I had recorded everything last night. I knew they were trespassing, measuring my shed, invading my property. But would the cops believe me over Gloria's dramatic performance? I held my hands up, calm but firm. "Officers, I've got video. Everything she says is false. They were on my property without permission. They threatened me. I did not point the gun at anyone." One of the officers raised an eyebrow. "You have video." "Yes, I recorded it," I said, fumbling for my phone. My hands shook slightly. I opened the footage, showing the shadows of the board members creeping around my backyard, whispering, measuring, acting like intruders. The silence in the room was deafening. Gloria's face twisted from outrage to panic. Her lips moved, but no sound came out. The officers watched intently as I played the recording frame by frame. "Ma'am," the taller officer said, turning to Gloria, "this footage shows you and your board members on private property trespassing. Do you understand what that means?" Gloria's voice faltered. We were just enforcing HOA rules." The officer shook his head. "That's not trespassing. You were on private property. They didn't threaten anyone. You committed the crime, not him." I felt a rush of relief, like someone had unclenched the tight fist around my chest. Gloria's face turned bright red, a mix of fury and disbelief. I could almost hear the gears grinding in her head. This wasn't supposed to happen. One officer gave her a stern warning. Stay away from this property and stop harassing the homeowner. If you come back without permission, that's a legal issue. I tried not to smirk. Instead, I nodded politely and said, "Thank you, officers, that will be all." Gloria spun on her heel, muttering under her breath, the kind of dramatic exit that makes you almost expect a soap opera soundtrack to play. After the officers left, I locked the door and sank onto my couch. My legs were still shaking from adrenaline, but the weight of immediate danger had lifted slightly. For the first time, I realized I wasn't alone in this fight. The law and common sense was on my side. I looked at my shed through the window, silent, innocent, but now it felt almost victorious, like it had survived an attack and stood taller than before. I laughed quietly to myself. Gloria thought intimidation would work, but she underestimated me. Then my phone buzzed again. Another text from an unknown number, a photo of my front yard with the words, "This isn't over." I groaned. I should have expected it. Gloria wasn't going to give up quietly. She thrived on control, fear, and chaos. But I realized something important in that moment. Her power was based entirely on intimidation. Remove the fear, remove her control. That was my new mantra. I spent the rest of the evening planning. Evidence, records, witnesses. Every move Gloria had made, every letter, email, and voicemail. I knew this was escalating into a full-blown confrontation, and I needed ammunition beyond just my shotgun. And yet I couldn't help but smile a little. For the first time, I felt the scales tipping in my favor. Gloria had crossed lines she shouldn't have, and now the law, reason, and common sense were starting to catch up to her. Still, I knew better than to celebrate too soon. This was far from over. She had the audacity, the determination, and the ego to escalate again, and when she did, I had to be ready. I glanced at the backyard one last time, shadows stretching long in the streetlight. My shed stood there calm and silent like a fortress. I whispered to myself almost like a promise. "You mess with my property, you mess with me, and I'm ready for you." The night ended quietly, but I couldn't shake the feeling that the real storm was coming. And when it hit, it would be bigger, louder, and far more dramatic than anything Gloria or her HOA minions ever expected. After last night, I knew this wasn't just about a shed anymore. Gloria wasn't simply enforcing HOA rules. She was running a personal vendetta disguised as bureaucracy, and if I didn't uncover what she was up to, she might think she could keep this up forever. So I started digging. I began with the basics: old HOA records, emails, receipts. I interviewed neighbors quietly, one by one, under the guise of casual conversation. That's when the story started to unfold, and it was worse than I expected. Turns out Gloria had been playing this game for years. She slapped outrageous fines on homeowners, sometimes for things as trivial as grass too green or flower beds out of alignment, and then demanded cash settlements that conveniently never went through the HOA bank account. A few neighbors whispered about liens she slapped illegally, taking RVs, sheds, even garden tools as collateral. The more I dug, the more the picture of her little empire became clear. This wasn't a neighborhood HOA president, it was a fraudster in khakis, a suburban crime boss hiding behind bylaws and clipboards. I found emails she had accidentally CC'd to the wrong person. One read: "Just make sure no payments go through the HOA bank account. We don't want a paper trail." I nearly dropped my phone. This was it, the proof of her shady, illegal activities. I also started compiling video footage, letters, and screenshots. Every threat she had made, every trespassing attempt, every $80 K or else note, it all went into a folder labeled Gloria's Madness. I couldn't help but chuckle a little. It felt like a detective show unfolding in real life. Only, instead of solving murders, I was exposing a woman who took pleasure in terrifying suburban homeowners. Neighbors came forward too, braver now that they saw someone challenging her. A man who had his RV temporarily confiscated told me he was terrified to speak up until he saw my footage. A couple whose flower beds had been meticulously inspected shared their stories of intimidation and secret fines. I realized something crucial. Gloria thrived on fear and silence. Remove those and she had no power. The puzzle pieces started forming a clear pattern. Every threat, every fine, every late-night visit, it was all designed to keep people quiet. Then came the voicemail. I had recorded it days ago but hadn't listened to it fully. This was different. Gloria, in her own voice, admitted exactly what she was doing. Just make sure they pay without making waves. The HOA isn't responsible for mistakes. Cash only, got it. I sat back and stared at my phone. This was the smoking gun, not just threats, not just trespassing, but an outright admission of extortion. My mind raced. What should I do next? Take it straight to the HOA board, the police, or should I confront her myself? The suspense hung heavy like a storm cloud over my backyard shed. I decided to be methodical. First, I would compile everything neatly, clearly, and indisputably. Then I would make sure every neighbor affected had copies. If Gloria tried to fight back, she would be surrounded by evidence she couldn't escape. While gathering the last set of documents, I felt a twinge of fear. What if she found out I was building this case? She'd come at me harder. I had already seen her escalate once, but I swallowed it down. Fear wouldn't win this battle. Then came another text, this time a photo of my shed from the street taken in the daylight, red arrows, circles, and the words, "You think you're clever." I almost dropped my phone. Gloria wasn't just a bureaucrat anymore. She was obsessive, watching, tracking, and trying to intimidate me. But instead of fear, I felt determination. She wanted a war, fine, she'd get one, but on my terms. I leaned back, letting out a slow breath. The pieces were falling into place. The evidence, the neighbors' stories, her own words, it was all coming together. I could see the path forward. I would expose her completely. I would take her power away. And when I did, the entire neighborhood would see the truth. The suspense lingered like electricity in the air. Gloria was watching, waiting for me to slip, but I wasn't going to. I had one advantage she didn't: preparation, patience, and the truth. As I stared at my backyard shed, moonlight filtering through the window, I whispered to myself, "You've underestimated me, and soon everyone will see exactly who you really are." Little did I know, the next confrontation, the public explosive showdown, was just around the corner. Gloria's empire of fear was about to collapse, and I was ready to be the spark that started it all. The day of the HOA meeting arrived. My stomach twisted as I drove up, the folder labeled Gloria's Madness heavy in my hands. This wasn't just a meeting anymore, it was a battlefield. Every eye in the room could turn against me, every word I spoke could tip the scales. I entered the community hall. The room was packed, neighbors murmuring, some with curiosity, some with apprehension. And there she was, Gloria, clipboard in hand, looking like a queen waiting to pass judgment, wearing that smug expression that had haunted me for weeks. I set my folder on the table, the weight of it symbolic, not just papers, but evidence, truth, and justice. I could feel the tension rise instantly. Every glance at Gloria was a spark ready to ignite. Gloria started the meeting, her voice sweet but sharp. "Today we discuss recent community concerns. I assure you all everything is in order." Her eyes flicked to me and I could see the challenge, "Try me." I took a deep breath. "Actually," I said, keeping my voice calm, "I think we have some things we need to discuss." A hush fell over the room, all eyes turned to me. Gloria's expression faltered, slightly, tiny cracks in the armor. I opened my folder and began presenting. Emails, receipts, recordings, videos, all of Gloria's actions laid bare. I walked the room through every illegal fine, every illegal lien, every intimidation tactic she had used over the years. The audience was riveted, some gasped, some whispered to neighbors. I could feel the momentum shifting with every document I revealed. This wasn't just a story anymore, it was a revelation. Then came the voicemail. I played it loud. Gloria's own voice, admitting cash-only fines and instructing board members to avoid the HOA bank account. The room erupted, neighbors shouted, some were laughing in disbelief, a few shook their heads in anger. Gloria screamed, "This is fake, fake, you're lying." But the evidence didn't lie. Every email, every photo, every video corroborated the voicemail. I continued, detailing every trespass and every threat. I explained how she had tried to intimidate me personally, showing the photos, the texts, and the recorded messages. The suspense in the room was palpable. You could hear the collective gasp as the neighbors realized how deep her deception went. Gloria's face turned bright red, veins visible on her forehead. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. She was trapped, not legally, but socially. The room was on my side. She had no allies left. One of the neighbors stood up. "I want my RV back," he yelled. Others joined in, sharing stories of fines and intimidation. The room was a storm of frustration and outrage, all pointing at Gloria. I paused, letting the moment sink in. This wasn't just about me anymore. This was about the entire neighborhood finally seeing her for who she really was. Gloria's clipboard slipped from her hands as she realized her empire of fear was crumbling. Her eyes darted around, searching for support, any escape. There was none. The room had turned. The suspense reached its peak. Then came silence. I looked around at the neighbors, everyone waiting, holding their breath. Gloria opened her mouth one last time, but even her voice faltered. She had no defense. I took a step back, letting the truth speak louder than my words. Justice was no longer something I hoped for, it was happening in real time, unfolding in front of everyone. As the meeting ended, Gloria was escorted out by a board member who had finally seen enough. Murmurs of relief and victory filled the room. Neighbors were shaking my hand, patting me on the back, thanking me for standing up. I looked at my folder one last time, all the evidence, all the proof I had done it. I had turned fear into power, intimidation into accountability. And yet in the back of my mind, a flicker of tension remained. Gloria wouldn't disappear quietly. She had a temper, a history of escalating situations. I knew this wasn't the end. The real storm, the fallout, was about to begin. But for now, for this moment, I let myself breathe. The confrontation was over, the truth was out. And the suspense? Well, it had just set the stage for the ultimate reckoning. The days after the HOA meeting felt surreal. I kept expecting Gloria to storm back into my life like some vengeful villain, clipboard in hand, ready to declare war. But instead, silence. At first, I thought maybe she was regrouping, plotting some grand retaliation. My phone buzzed constantly with emails from neighbors checking in, grateful and relieved. But my gut told me the storm wasn't over. It never is with people like her. Then came the first blow to Gloria's little empire. One by one, the HOA fines she had illegally imposed started getting reversed. Bank accounts were audited. The board, embarrassed and exposed, began distancing themselves from her. The neighborhood started murmuring about accountability, about oversight. Gloria tried to fight back publicly. She sent letters, emails, even made frantic calls to some of the neighbors, claiming misunderstanding or clerical error. But this time, no one believed her. They'd seen the evidence firsthand. They'd heard her own voice on the voicemail, watched the videos, read the emails. Her power had evaporated. One afternoon, I got a call from a neighbor. "She's been arrested," they whispered. They found evidence of multiple extortions, illegal liens, and harassment. I could barely process it. Gloria, my clipboard-wielding nemesis, was gone. Her reign of terror was over. The relief was almost intoxicating, but it came with a strange mix of disbelief. After weeks of fear, adrenaline, and late-night vigilance, justice had arrived. Neighbors started coming over one by one to thank me. Some brought baked goods, some just wanted to shake my hand. There were laughs, jokes, and even tears. For the first time in weeks, my backyard felt like my own again. My shed was safe. My property was mine. But as I leaned against my porch railing, watching the sunset, I realized something. Gloria had left a trail of chaos. The HOA board was disorganized. Some neighbors had lingering fears. Others were wary of future Glorias. The battle was won, but the war for peace of mind, that was just beginning. Then came the subtle reminders that she wasn't done in spirit. A stray text here, a phone call there. Small acts meant to intimidate, to test if I would waver. But I didn't. Every message, every passive-aggressive note only reminded me why I had fought back, and it strengthened my resolve. The neighborhood slowly began to heal. A new HOA board was elected, honest, transparent, and accountable. Fines became reasonable. Decisions were made democratically. The oppressive atmosphere that Gloria had created for years started to lift. It was almost like the neighborhood was breathing for the first time in a long time. I took the time to sit in my backyard, coffee in hand, looking at the shed. Silent, innocent, almost smug, it had survived the storm. And so had I, but I couldn't ignore the lessons I'd learned. Fear can be powerful, but evidence, courage, and persistence are stronger. I thought back to that first knock on the door, the day Gloria announced the $80,000 fine. The days of threats, trespassing, and intimidation had felt endless. But now, looking at the aftermath, I could see the whole picture. It was a battle of wills, a test of patience, and ultimately a victory for reason and justice. And yet, as much as the neighborhood was celebrating, I knew better than to get complacent. People like Gloria often leave a legacy, a reminder that power can be abused if left unchecked. But this time, the lesson was clear. Stand up, gather your evidence, and never let fear dictate your actions. Neighbors approached me again that evening. One said, "We owe you everything. You didn't just save your property, you saved all of us." I smiled quietly, feeling a mix of pride and exhaustion. The adrenaline that had fueled me for weeks was finally fading, replaced with a sense of closure and calm. But the satisfaction wasn't just personal, it was collective. The neighborhood had reclaimed its peace. And as I glanced at my shed one last time that day, I whispered to myself almost as a promise, You tried to scare me, you tried to bully all of us, but your empire is gone and this neighborhood isn't yours anymore, not now, not ever. The suspense had finally resolved, at least for now. Gloria's reign was over. The evidence, the confrontation, and the courage had done their work, but the story wasn't just about her defeat, it was about empowerment, about standing firm, and about the quiet triumph of justice in the most unexpected of suburban battlegrounds. And while some tension remained, a memory, a warning, the fear had dissipated. My property, my neighborhood, and my peace were finally safe. Weeks had passed since Gloria's arrest, yet I couldn't stop checking my backyard. Old habits die hard. Every creak, every shadow, even the rustle of leaves reminded me of those tense nights when my property had felt like a war zone. But now peace had returned, truly. My shed stood quietly, bathed in sunlight, unthreatening, almost smug in its innocence. The $80,000 nightmare was over. The HOA had been restructured, fines were reasonable, and neighbors smiled again without fear. For the first time in months, I felt like I could actually breathe. I laughed to myself, remembering the absurdity of it all. A fine for a shed, $80,000, the nerve. It had started as a simple backyard dispute and escalated into a suburban saga of intimidation, trespassing, and one woman's obsession with control. Neighbors stopped by to check in, some bringing treats, others just waving from across the street. I waved back, smiling, knowing we had collectively survived Gloria's reign. One of them jokingly asked if I wanted to start a HOA defense league, and I almost laughed out loud. Almost. It wasn't just about defending property, it was about defending dignity, fairness, and sanity. The neighborhood had rallied quietly behind me, lending evidence, stories, and moral support. In a strange way, Gloria had united us, if only by giving us a common enemy. I found myself reflecting on those long nights. The trespassing, the threats, the text messages with red circles, the voicemail recordings, and the tense confrontation at the HOA meeting. The adrenaline, fear, and frustration had been intense, but they had taught me something invaluable. Courage isn't the absence of fear, it's acting despite it. Gloria, of course, had left a trail of drama behind her. Some neighbors were still uneasy, hesitant to trust the HOA, wary that someone else might try to seize power in the same way. But the difference now was that we had evidence, structure, and confidence. Gloria's empire was gone, and the lesson she left was clear: abuse of authority has consequences. I spent the evening sitting on my porch, coffee in hand, watching the sunset over my backyard. My shed gleamed faintly in the golden light, a silent witness to the battles waged and the victories won. I whispered quietly, half to myself, half to the universe. You tried to scare me, you tried to control me, you failed. This neighborhood is ours, not yours. The suspense of the past weeks had faded, replaced by a satisfying calm. And yet the experience lingered, like a shadow reminding me that vigilance is always necessary. Gloria might be gone, but the potential for chaos never fully disappears. That's life in any community. Rules, personalities, and power struggles mix in unpredictable ways. I chuckled, shaking my head at the absurdity. Who knew a backyard shed could spark such drama? A simple structure that had stood quietly for years had become the centerpiece of a suburban thriller. And me? I had survived, outsmarted, and exposed the chaos, all without losing my sanity. As night fell, I locked the doors, glanced once more at the shed, and smiled. It was over. The fear, the intimidation, the sleepless nights, they were all behind me. For now, at least, the backyard was mine, the neighborhood was safe, and the lesson was clear. Stand firm, gather your evidence, and never let bullies dictate your life. Gloria had underestimated me, underestimated the community, and underestimated what determination and truth could accomplish. And in the end, it wasn't just about winning. It was about reclaiming peace, restoring order, and proving that even in the strangest, most absurd situations, common sense and courage can triumph over fear and chaos. I took one last look around, feeling the quiet pride that comes from victory. My neighbors, my property, and my sanity were intact, and while I knew I might face new challenges in the future, I also knew this: I had the tools, the experience, and the confidence to face whatever came next. The backyard was still, the shed gleamed, and for the first time in weeks I felt a smile spread across my face, part relief, part satisfaction, part triumph. This wasn't just a story about a fine or a shed. It was a story about standing your ground, facing threats head-on, and turning fear into action. And as I sipped the last of my coffee, I whispered, half joking, half serious: Gloria, wherever you are, remember this: next time, pick a fight you can actually win. And with that, I finally, completely and utterly relaxed. Every HOA has a story on HOA headaches. You'll hear the ones they tried to bury. Subscribe today.